All right. Good morning and welcome to the Ancillary Service State of Charge Constraint Market Simulation Training. You may have seen another stakeholder process for an Ancillary Service State of Charge Constraint initiative that's going to be starting in third quarter. That is separate from this. It's a different initiative in case there was any confusion about that. But we'll get into the background of what this particular initiative is about in just a couple slides. So the purpose of this training is to prepare you to participate in the market sim for the summer release and to explain the parameters of the retroactive settlement. I'm joined here by a number of my subject matter experts who may jump in to help answer the questions. So we'll be hearing from them along the way. And I've got Mo Monetry as my producer to help me run the session. So if you have questions regarding the WebEx platform or anything like that, she'll be happy to help. She's also going to be monitoring to see who has their hands raised and if there's questions in the chat, just to make sure I don't miss any of that. The slide deck is currently posted in the Learning Center on the ISO website, and I will add the recording after the session once it's ready. So let's get started. So who is this training for? Is this training for you? Well, if you are a scheduling coordinator that has storage resources that are certified for ancillary services, then you're in the right place. And specifically, we're looking at the market sim team from your organizations and the settlements team. So those are the folks who this is really focused towards, although everyone is welcome to attend. First, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. You've probably seen the slide before if you've been on any other ISO training sessions. And essentially, please keep yourself on mute unless you have a question. And you can either raise your hand or put a question in the WebEx chat, and we'll get to your questions. At the end of each section, I have a placeholder for questions, so we'll get to you then. Let's look at today's agenda. So these times that I have on here are estimates. This is about how long I think things might take, but we're going to talk about the background of this initiative and what this is covering. We're going to go through some suggested scenarios to enable you to make the constraint bind in the market sim. We're going to talk about settlements impact, and then we'll do a wrap up with a summary of things that you should be doing to participate in this. Okay.
We do have a hand raised from Gabe. He just wanted to add a comment before we get started. Gabe, please feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy and Monica, both. I appreciate it. Just in regard to the stakeholder initiative that we're talking about opening currently in Q3 and what we're doing here, there is a relationship, and we've had a couple questions about this, so I think it's just important to clarify what's going on. At the time that we filed this, this was a change that we filed at FERC way back in September of 2022. And what we said at the time, and the reason we made the filing at the time, was that we were concerned about a potential for gaming opportunities. And because of the potential for gaming opportunities, we didn't want to open up a stakeholder process at that time and say, gee, here's a problem statement, and by the way, kind of exploiting this problem could potentially lead to, market outcomes that would be counter to what we want via gaming. And because of that, we simply went forward with a presentation at the Board of Governors meeting and a very quick, just a couple days after that filing at FERC, that said we're going to close the loophole. We're going to make changes that we think are appropriate to close the loophole. And then what we committed to was going back and opening up a stakeholder process. So the stakeholder process that Cindy was alluding to is certainly related to this effort. It's just going to be in addition and beyond what we're doing here. So I think what Cindy's going to run through today, and this is really important, are the changes that are effective per the filing that we made way back in September. But then I think everybody should just be on notice that there will be a successive stakeholder initiative that we currently plan to open in Q3, where we're going to sort of reevaluate the assumptions that we made when we made this filing back in September.
Thank you, Gabe. All right, I appreciate that. So I'm going to cover some of the same things when we go through the background, which we will do next. So the issue that we were struggling with was in spring of 2022, our Department of Market Monitoring noted that there were some large bid cost recovery payments connected with reg down awards and self-provision of regulation paired with high energy bids. So as you can see here, the issue was that there were ancillary service awards and high energy bids, and we were seeing a lot of dollars in bid cost recovery. After doing some analysis, we realized that the cause was the ancillary service state of charge constraint. When it became binding, it led to storage resources being dispatched uneconomically and therefore getting large bid cost recovery payments. Now, the ancillary service state of charge constraint, let's talk about what that is. That ensures that storage resources are scheduled to provide, ancillary service have a sufficient state of charge to actually provide the service in real time for at least 30 minutes. So we want to make sure that there's always headroom. So resources were getting dispatched to ensure that that happened, and they still are. And that led to large bid cost recovery payments. Now, the solution that we're bringing forth initially is that when the situation happens, when the ancillary service state of charge constraint is binding, the real-time bid cost, there'll be a flag that ensures that we're not giving bid cost recovery payments for that. And I'll go into more detail about that later. Gabe gave a really good summary of the issue. If you really want to dig into that, you can look at the bid cost recovery FERC order that I have a link to at the bottom of the presentation. And as Gabe said, there will be a follow-up going forward starting in third quarter for the ancillary service state of charge constraint. So that is the background that I was going to give. Before we get into the market sim scenarios, are there any other questions that anyone has just on the overall initiative? I see Alba.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alba.
Sorry, Cindy, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is Alva Svoboda from PG&E. Going back to the previous slide, I wanted to just get a basic clarification. I'm glad you laid it out as clearly as this. When the ancillary service state of charge constraint is binding, does that mean it's binding in the binding interval, or is it binding in any of the advisory intervals of the real-time, either the real-time RTPD or RTD processes?
Hey, Alva, this is Gabe. It's the binding interval.
So only if you see it binding in the binding interval does this apply. Great. Thank you, Gabe.
Correct. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Gabe. I see Chenyu, I didn't mean to skip over you. I see that you have a question as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Gabe, for providing that background. I think my question is more for Gabe that, so the current, what we about to implement, and the open the stakeholder process, is that any, I want to say, in terms of scope-wise, anything complicating the implementation? So what it's opening to the stakeholder process now, I want to ask, is that going to impact the way we're going to implement this, the June 1st, this initiative?
So I'm thinking that we're going to implement what we have here now. I think we don't know until we get to the end of that stakeholder process where we're going with that. So that would be another, release in the future. If anybody wants to add on to that, go ahead.
I think my hope would be that, we sort of don't overly complicate, whatever we're going to do in the stakeholder initiative. I think maybe this is the question that you're trying to really get at is my suspicion is that the scope is going to be very narrow for that initiative. It's not planned currently to be an initiative that lasts very long. So I think we might have, kind of an issue paper straw proposal put out at the same time. Again, probably very limited scope. We might have a workshop on that. And I think we've heard some of the opinions of some of the parties already in this initiative through the comments that we've through this process that Cynthia's been working through. And then, I think because of that limited scope, I would suspect that the stakeholder initiative won't last very long. And then the other thing I would just mention is that it's possible that we don't make any changes to this. So I think we should just keep that in mind as well. Does that help at all?
Yes, then, but that also sparked another question. So if the outcome of the stakeholder process or contradict or having additional enhancement to the current solutions, from implementation point of view, I just wonder where are we going with that? Whether do we have a plan to prepare?
Yeah. That would sort of follow the standard process of new policy development. So, we've got we've got rules in place today. Sometimes we want to change those rules. We want to make modifications. We open up a stakeholder process. At the conclusion of the stakeholder process, we come up with business requirements for how we're going to change our systems internally. And then as we're implementing those, we have a meeting like this to kind of broadcast out exactly the mechanics of how all those changes are going to work and how they're going to impact market participants. So it will be a whole nother process like this.
Okay, sounds good. And as far as I'm understanding, this one's still going as a June 1, regardless of the stakeholders process. Because thinking if the outcome coming out from stakeholder process could be labeled as enhancement or something that for a later phase. I just trying to figure it out this June 1 scope, it's going to change before June 1 or after June 1, or it's going to impact the June 1 going live.
So what we have scheduled to go on June 1 is going on June 1.
Okay.
And, just like everything that we implement, it could change in the future. But for right now, the summer initiative, the release that we have is going June 1 for the scope that was in the BRS.
Sounds good. Thank you both.
Okay.
This is very helpful.
Sure. All right, I don't see any other questions, so I am going to continue on to the market sim scenarios. So for those of you who were on the market sim call last week, we did give you some suggestions of scenarios, and we actually have elaborated on those a little bit more. So the scenarios that are in this presentation have been updated from the ones from the market sim call. So the purpose of this section is that we're going to talk about how to make those constraints bind. We're going to give you some suggestions. If you looked in the BRS, you would see that the guidance to market participants was that we wanted you to storage resource SCs shall submit energy bids and competitive regulation bids to receive regulation awards to trigger the AS state of charge constraint to be binding in the 15-minute and 5-minute intervals. Potential scenarios include energy bids to bid cap. So the next slides I'm going to show you will give you a little bit more on that. Of course, the source system is cyber. The results will, it'll be impacting the real-time market. You could see impact to settlements, and there's a new CMRI report, which I'm going to show you. So the first suggested scenario, and if you were on the market sim meeting, the scenarios that we presented were for real time. We've added on the day ahead piece in front of that in these scenarios. So I'll go through it. I'm going to go through 2 full scenarios. I'll stop after the first one and see if there's questions, because the first 2, this slide and the next one are about getting the lower AS/SOC constraint to bind, and then the following scenario is for the upper. So let's start with the day ahead for scenario 1, modifying the storage resource bid so the lower AS/SOC constraint becomes binding. We're suggesting that in hour ending 1 through hour ending 8, submit energy bids covering the energy range from 0 to PMAX at a bid price of negative $150, meaning that you don't have any megawatts in the negative range. So you're going from 0 to PMAX at negative 150. You're not going to have any ancillary service bids. And what this is going to do, it's going to deplete the state of charge. Hour ending 9 through 24 in the day ahead, submit energy bids from 50% of the PMIN to 0 with a bid price of $1,000 and no bid on the energy positive range. And you may wonder about the PMIN divided by 2. So that would represent 50% of the PMIN. And this is related to the Energy Storage Enhancements Initiative, Track 1, and we have training on that tomorrow. So you'll learn a little bit more about that. But essentially, if you have an ancillary service award, you need to have a bid, at least an energy bid in real time for 50% of your ancillary service award. So that's why that PMIN divided by 2 is there. And that's just what we used when we were developing our scenarios. In addition to those energy bids, you're going to want to put a reg up bid for negative PMIN megawatts at $0 per megawatt. And the reason for this is it's going to help the resource get awarded for reg up in day ahead. The next slide looks very similar, but it is for real time. So you're going to do the same things in hour 1 through 8. You're going to submit energy bids covering that positive range from 0 to PMAX at negative $150 with no ancillary service bid, again, depleting that state of charge. And then hour 9 through 24, you're going to want to submit energy bids from 50% of your PMIN to the PMAX with a bid price of negative $150. And B, you're going to also bid reg up for the maximum possible amount of dollars per megawatt. And this is going to enable the lower AS/SOC constraint to bind. So this is the first set of scenarios. And what I'm going to do is I am going to stop and see if there are questions. We'll go through the other scenario, then we'll talk a little bit about the settlement, and I'll show you the CMRI report. So are there questions on the last 2 slides that I just presented with the scenarios? I see that Alva.
Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, Alva, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, this is terrific. I really appreciate this. 2 questions. Are the slides already online so that we don't have to have you hold on these while we actually modify our bids for tomorrow? Because I believe tomorrow is the day we want to actually have this trigger. So I'd like to work on this while you're continuing, but I need this information. It's really
Yep.
great, very helpful.
Sure, and thanks to Yannick for that. The slides are already posted. They're in the Learning Center on the ISO website. They're also on the release planning page, and they're also in the stakeholder initiative. No, they're not in the stakeholder initiative page because there wasn't a stakeholder initiative on this, but you will find them on the release planning page and also in the Learning Center.
Perfect, that's wonderful. Thank you. Very, very helpful.
Mike, do you have a question?
Yeah, hey Cindy. So for the can I assume that the ISO will set the reg up requirement to be sufficient to allow anybody to clear if everybody's targeting the same hours?
That is a great question. I think I'm going to defer to Yannick on that one.
Yeah, this is something we can look into. I mean, the way we set it up here, I would expect the storage resources to be awarded AS in the day ahead, because I mean, not only we bid them at a price which is very low. I mean, 0 is the floor price, but also we're trying to minimize their opportunity cost for doing so, right? Because when we're bidding reg up, we're making the charging bid very, very attractive. So there is no downside to awarding any reg up under those conditions. And same thing in the other direction for the reg down. But yeah, if we see that if those storage resources do not get the day awards in the day ahead, then yeah, we would consider increasing the requirements for reg up and reg down.
Yeah, it seems like just going into it with higher, especially reg up, as it's been, it's lower across some of these hours that you're mentioning. It would help to just set it to like 3,000 or 4,000 megawatts for a requirement, and ensure that you get. I mean,
Right.
That may screw up the market solution.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Thank you. And then, so this scenario is going to be run multiple times, right? And so we can. And then and I'm sorry if you guys discussed this on the simulation, but how quickly after will we see the settlements produced for this?
I don't know the market sim timeline. Can somebody who's more familiar with the market sim, how it's run, answer that question, or we talk about it this afternoon in the market sim call, perhaps? Go ahead, Trang.
Yeah, so Tyler can also respond, but in the market sim presentation and on the release planning page, there's a settlements calendar, and it shows the trade dates that we're settling and when the initials in the recounts will publish. So, for example, for trade date the 2nd, we will publish the initial on Tuesday the 9th. So you're looking about a week for a trade date to see the initial. Okay.
Okay, I'll take another look, and I'll bring up any issues on the sim call. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Okay, great. I see Chen Yu, you have a question?
Yes, hi, thank you, Cynthia. I want to ask whether the two, one is a real time, one's a day ahead, those scenarios looks slightly different. Do you suggest that we run it in 2 different trade days, or we can actually combine those?
So
I think we could use the same trade date, and it'll be the real time from the day ahead. But Yannick, go ahead.
No, exactly. You're absolutely right. Yeah, this is for the same trade date. So that means you would need to submit the bids for the day ahead the day before, right? Because the trade date in the day ahead that's settled a day before, and then in real time you have to submit bids for the same trade date. So, for example, if you want to see some results tomorrow, you need to submit bids today. I can try to see if we can delay the running of the day ahead market on that stage. And then once the day ahead has cleared, then you can submit your real time bids for tomorrow, for the trade date of tomorrow. And so I mean, it's a bit difficult, but I feel it's kind of important that we try to get AS awards in the day ahead, because those AS awards are very much protected in the real time, and this is what is going to make it a lot more likely that the AS SSC constraint is going to bind. Okay, because the real time won't have a choice but to meet those DA AS awards, and it will be ready to clear some very uneconomical energy bids in order to do so. Like, if you look at the bidding strategy in real time, we're bidding some very uneconomical, either charging bids for reg up or discharging bids for reg down. But these are the kind of conditions under which the ASSC constraints are going to bind.
Okay, thank you. And I just saw that like hour 9 to 24, and they have a slide bit right up and the payment, and then in the real time, the suggestion is a bit right up for maximum possible amount. So just seeing that it might be, we can probably do it a different hour, just kind of wonder if it's just easier for you guys. And anyway, I'm not an expert here, but I just saw the difference, and that's why I have the question whether that will be easier to differentiate those scenarios. Yeah.
Right. So the hours, I mean, you can see we have two sets of hours from hour 1 to hour 8, ending 1 to hour ending 8, and from 9 to 24. I mean, it's flexible. You can move this however you want. Like the first set of hours, it's just designed, it's just there to prepare the storage to either deplete the SOC, in case you want to see the lower ASSC constraint binding, or in the other case to charge up the SOC if you want to see the upper ASSC constraint binding. So the first set of hours, all I'm asking for is that you give it at least 5-6 hours, so that whatever the state of charge of the storage is at the beginning of at midnight, we have enough time to either entirely deplete it or fully charge it. Right? There needs to be enough of those hours to get to the lower or upper SOC limit.
Thank you.
And for the second set of hours, same thing. I mean, it's the rest of the day, but you can do that for just a few hours if you want. Yeah, it's free. I just try to keep it simple and make it similar in day ahead and real time as much as possible. But again, in day ahead, the goal is to get those day ahead AS awards in the second set of hours from hour ending 9 to hour ending 24, and in real time. Well, hopefully you get those AS awards to clear in the A, and in real time you will see from hour 9 to hour ending 24, you will see the ASSC constraint binding. Hopefully, if all goes well. But yeah, it's important to get them binding in the day ahead. If you don't get any AS award binding in day ahead, it's unlikely that the 15-minute market is going to award AS by itself, especially with this kind of bidding, because there are some very large opportunity costs in real time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the explanation.
Thank you, Yannick, and thank you, Chen-Yu, for the question. A couple of things before I go to the next questioner. There was a question in the chat about settlements that was answered, so thank you very much for that. If you want to take a look, you can scroll up and take a look at that. Also, Mo has put some great links in for you to the release planning page, to the Learning Center, to the payments calendar, and specifically to the market sim calendar that Trang was talking about. I see there's a couple of other questions. Wei, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, you pronounced it correctly. This is Wei Zhou from AC. I just want, when you say that lower ancillary service SOC constraint to bind,
yeah,
that's the can you be more specific about it, because there are like multiple ancillary service constraints. Because in the real-time market, you do have, energy ancillary services have to be, you have 30 minutes of awarded ancillary services to support that, the ancillary services. Are you talking here is the ancillary service constraint where you consider the regulation in your SOC calculation?
So I think the lower and the upper AS SOC constraints have more to do with like whether we're talking about, so Let me just show you. In these examples, we're using in real time, you're bidding reg up for the maximum amount of megawatts. And when we go to the next scenario, you'll see it's in the opposite direction, and we're completely charging up the state of charge, and then we're bidding reg down. So there's an upper constraint and a lower constraint, whether we're talking about whether it's being charged or discharged. Does that help answer the question?
So you're talking about the regulation in the SOC calculation, like 50% regulation will be factored into the SOC calculation, which doesn't exist today, but will be implemented tomorrow or under this proposal.
It already exists. The constraint has been there for a little while now. That's why the settlements are going to be retroactive. It's already there. I think maybe you were talking about, if you're going to have an AS bid, then you need energy bid in the opposite direction. That's something which is new in, as part of the energy storage enhancements initiative.
Because I think in the previous slide, you mentioned about the ancillary services constraint will make a resource being dispatched economically. Mm-hmm. So, you also mentioned ancillary service constraint. So here you also mentioned lower and up SOC, ancillary service SOC constraint. So I'm a little bit confused which constraint you're talking about.
So far, we've only talked about the lower ones. The lower one is, when you're going to have reg up or spin awards, then at the beginning of the interval, we want to make sure we have enough SOC to sustain them for 30 minutes. So it's just whenever we award reg up or spin, we want to make sure we have some energy in storage so that we're able to serve those ancillary service awards if necessary. And so that's for the lower, and for the upper, it's the same thing, but in the other directions for reg down. But for reg down, then in that case, you don't need energy in storage. You need to have you need to have some headroom in the storage so that you can potentially absorb more energy, right? Because you're going in the other direction. You're not trying to provide energy. You're trying to absorb it. So these are the lower and the upper ASOC constraints. So we just cover the first scenario, which is for the lower one, and then I think we'll cover the second scenario, which is upper one. But it's the same principle in the other direction.
So, wait, is your question what? We have just to go back for a second about what ancillary service state of charge constraint is. It's providing the headroom, and the upper one is for the reg down, and
so
then the lower reg up.
Yeah, the lower is for
this is the exact slide. I think you're talking about the real-time SOC constraint is referring to the same constraint you're showing here on this slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And also, just a related question. Can I add a follow-up question? So with the new proposal where you're going to require 50% of the opposite energy bid, right? I think that's the new policy. So with that policy, would you be able to simulate this type of behavior as well in this market sim, or is it a different market sim?
I think that's so that is related to the energy storage enhancements track 1 initiative, and that is also going to be in the market sim. So, and I have training on that one tomorrow as well. I will be providing training.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Elva, you can unmute.
Yes. Again, I think these scenarios are really well set up. One comment I would make, and it's sort of in response to what Chen Yu was saying, I don't think we can do both of these scenarios on the same day. It's much more reliable to do one of them on a day. So that means we really need to have more days of settlements, because we need a day for reg up, a day for reg down. We also need a day for spin, because you've also imposed this constraint for spin. But I think the way these are set up is perfect for being able to test this. So I really appreciate that.
A couple of points. One thing, if you have more than one storage resource, you could do different storage resources.
Right.
And do
Yeah,
them.
no, I'm thinking we basically just have one. I mean, it's not really worth testing on the other one. There's not even live telemetry. So the other point I was going to make, and this goes back to actually a question that from what Wei was saying, is one of the things we observed when we saw ourselves hitting the ASSC constraint, we were in a situation where we had no energy bids. And are you going to have potentially both of that? So if there's an energy bid, it's fairly easy to see what the ISO is going to do in that situation. Are you also going to have the possibility of triggering this with no energy bids? Because that actually was the situation prior to this new energy storage enhancements deployment, is that we had situations where all of our regulation was awarded for our full range, and so there was absolutely no way for CAISO to dispatch using an energy curve. And I don't even know how they dispatch, but I'd actually like to know how you would plan to do that.
Good question. Can one of my SMEs help out with that one? I don't know the answer. Or maybe it's something we'll look into. I'm not sure.
That's a good question. I mean, I think that's what the energy storage enhancement project is supposed to address, right? Because now, whenever we have those, even whenever you submit AS bid, you're going to have at least a 50% energy bid in the opposite direction.
Right.
So it
and
will be,
probably, yeah.
Sure.
So there may be a bit of an issue with testing that other scenario, but I think that was important to us too, because we didn't quite understand how you were moving us around when we were hitting those constraints without an energy bid.
Right. Yeah. That's a good question. I'm not really sure how that worked out in the past. I mean, probably the AS award must have been dropped or something like this. I'm not.
Maybe even a description of what happens in that case would be enough. I think we don't want to like further complicate it. You've developed such nice scenarios here, but we certainly would like to know what the process is in that case, because it could probably still happen.
Okay, thank you. We'll have...
because of this requirement, you will need to have an energy bid in the opposite direction. Like Cyber will not, will flag it if you don't have the energy bid. So if the energy storage enhancement project should not happen anymore, you'll be forced to have an energy bid.
But you could still have a case where you run out of energy though, and then you'd have your this use case could still apply. So if you could describe the logic, that'd be good.
Alva, yeah, I think your comment is still relevant. I do also agree with Yannick. I think, what we're trying to do is have those scenarios happen much less often than what is currently happening. But yes, there could be a potential scenario where storage resources don't have stated charge and they're still being relied upon to provide ancillary services. In those cases, and this is similar to cases today, our operations team could potentially, take that resource off of ancillary services, and it would be awarded no pay, and try to procure in the 15-minute market some replacement capacity for those resources, and that can't happen today.
Escape.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I see that Wei, you have your hand raised.
Hi. So I still have a follow-up question, maybe for Gabe on this one. So with the requirement or proposal where you will require 50% of energy bid on the opposite direction of the ancillary service award in a day ahead, do you still anticipate this ancillary, real-time ancillary service constraint can, become binding with that proposal being implemented?
I'm not quite sure I follow the question. You're asking.
Yeah, so I think the question is very simple. So with this, the new proposal where you require, 50% of energy bid in opposite direction of the day-ahead ancillary service award, right?
Yeah.
So that's already being considered in your calculation of the state of charge. So when you give out like the ancillary service, the regulation awards, you can already consider SOC, what you're going to require for the ancillary awards. Now the question is, when you move to real-time market, because when you give out the day-ahead awards, you already consider the SOC impact. So in a real-time market, do you still anticipate this real-time ancillary service constraint going to bind?
Sure. Yeah, it certainly can bind. And I think we kind of go back to discussions that, sometimes the day-ahead market doesn't perfectly align with the real-time market, and because we don't have alignment, and we see that all the time today. There's conditions that emerge in real time that aren't anticipated. Things are changing from the beginning of the hour to the end of the hour, and the day-ahead market is just sort of trying to hit an average of what we think is going to happen in real time. So yeah, there could certainly be differences, and we want to make sure that in the event that a storage resource does have low state of charge and is providing upward ancillary services, reg up, that resource, even in the real-time market, has state of charge, even if it was anticipated to have a lot of state of charge in the day-ahead market. But I think that's a cornerstone of the problem.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, this real-time ancillary service state of charge will still bind in the real-time market once the new proposal was implemented.
It certainly could, yeah, and we anticipate it too. Yeah.
Has CAISO done any analysis how often or in the frequency of this constraint would change? Like, would it be binding less or be like a same binding frequency this real-time SOC going to bind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. We haven't done any serious analysis on it, and I think it's a little bit tough to do because even if we did perfect analysis on it today, given current market scenarios, I think in the future, as our market evolves and we have a different resource mix on the grid, things are going to change because of that as well. So I think this is more of a, let's put these constraints in place today. Let's continue to monitor how often they bind and what these binding constraints and how these binding constraints actually impact market outcomes. And let's continue to evaluate that. And as the market evolves, let's see how that changes. But I do anticipate that it's going to continue to bind. Hopefully our modeling in the day-ahead market gets better, but I don't think that's a guarantee anywhere. Let's see how it evolves over time.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate your answer, Gabe.
Sure, Wayne.
Thank you both. So I think we got a lot of questions out of the way when we went over the lower constraint scenario. I'm going to go through the upper constraint scenario, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's the same thing, just in the opposite direction, and we want to get through the rest of the slide deck. So as this is 2, and in this one, we have an hour 1 through 8. We're going to submit energy bids covering a negative range from P-min to 0 at a bid price of a positive $1,000, and then a bid and up that state of charge. Then from hours 9 to 24, hour ending 9 to 24, we'd submit an energy bid from 0 to Pmax, 50% of the Pmax, with a bid price of negative $150, and bid reg down for Pmax megawatts at $0. And this helps get the resource awarded reg down in day ahead. Then we move to real time, and we're doing pretty much the same thing. Hour 1 through 8, we're submitting those energy bids. covering the negative energy range from P-min to 0 at a price of $1,000. Again, charging the state of charge, and in hour ending 9 through hour ending 24, we're submitting energy bids from P-min to half of the P-max with 50% with a bid price of $300. And then bid reg down for the maximum possible amount at $0, and enables the upper AS SOC constraint to bind. So that is the other scenario. I'm going to continue on, and when it gets to the end of this section, I'll stop and see if there are any questions about this. It doesn't look like there are any questions right now. So there is going to be a new report in CMRI. It's in the real-time tab, and it's the Market Active Resource Constraints Report. You can see that you have the option of executing it in the 5-minute or 15-minute timeframes, RTD, RTUC. It has a constraint name, it has your trade date, the SCID, the resource. You see there's a column there for the constraint name, and right now it's ASSOC, and for right now, that is the only constraint you'll find in this report. But I guess putting the column in there so we can maybe use it in the future for other things. And then you see hour 1 through 24. I only did part of the report, but you can see there is a Y when we have the constraints binding. So you can compare that with your settlements and say, yes, those were the hours when the constraint was binding, or the 5-minute intervals, or whatever. All right, there was a request in MarketSim to give us a little more information about the settlements. So for those of you who are into variable names and formulas and things like that, this is your slide. There is the pre-calc for the real-time market net amount. And within that pre-calc, there is a new section which has the flag, and it is section 3.6.1.2.6. And this formula determines whether the net amount should be considered for bid cost recovery or not. And it gets the information from the market as to whether the constraint was binding in a particular interval. So customers can see that the constraint is binding through that CMRI report I told you about. Then if they have a real-time bid cost recovery shortfall, meaning the cost is greater than the revenue, then the net amount will be zeroed out. If they have a bid cost recovery surplus, meaning the cost is less than the revenue in that interval, then the net amount will be counted in the overall daily real-time bid cost recovery calculation. So you can see I have the billing determinants there that you're going to look for, and if either one of those is a 1, then the constraint is binding. So I'm going to stop before moving on to the next section, which is the settlement's impact, and see if anyone has any questions. I do see first in the chat, I got a private message. Somebody wants the link to where the PowerPoint is located. So Mo, if you could put that out there, that would be great. And actually, Katie, Candy Curry, if you look in, just put the link on there again. Terrific. Thank you. I see that Sean has a question. Sean, do you want to unmute and ask a question?
Hello, thank you so much. Yes, I understand that there are basically 6 reasons. I have in some document, I don't know the document, but it gives the 6 reasons for an ancillary service no pay condition from the determinants file. And I'm curious, the SOC binding, the AS SOC binding report in CMRI that you show, if it says yes, should that correspond to the no pay condition that resource has constraint disqualifications?
So I'm gonna answer this, and then Tyler, if you have any additional input. No, this flag would be set before it would get to the situation where there would be no pay. Tyler, can you confirm that?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So this basically guarantees that the bindingness of the constraint guarantees that the awards don't occur in such a way that resource has constraint disqualifications.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question there.
The constraint binds in the market. I guess I'm just trying to clarify. The constraint binds in the market. So therefore, if this is yes, the constraint was binding, but since it was binding, it wasn't awarded in such a way that would be infeasible, and therefore there isn't a no pay.
I'm still not, can somebody help clarify that? I'm still not getting the question. It is true that there would not be no pay for this. If this situation occurs and the constraint is binding, then the pre-calc would say, this is binding, therefore, if it would not be contributing towards the bid cost recovery. You could not recover the bid costs for that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, I guess it's settlements related. I see the implication. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. I think this constraint was updated a few years ago, and my understanding was that when it's binding, the market would have a dispatch for energy to avoid having no pay trigger for ASSOC, or sorry, for the AS awards, and the prioritization of the energy and making sure that the state of charge had headroom to have those awards be able to be met, and like you said, not trigger no pay. But that's where the issue came up of the BCR as a result of that.
That helps, Sean? Okay, Sean's back on mute.
Yes.
So
sorry.
Yep, okay.
Found the button.
That's okay.
Thank you.
All right, Mike, it looks like you're up next.
Thanks, Cindy. So it looks like you're combining both the 15 and the 5 minutes. So if the constraint is enforced in either, you're disqualified from receiving bid cost recovery.
That is what it's for.
And it seems like I can envision and may have seen situations where there were dispatches based on just the time differences in the look ahead between the RTPD and the RTD, where the RTPD may have been constrained, the RTD wasn't, and there are dispatches that shouldn't be ineligible for bid cost recovery. I don't know if that's something that was discussed during the development of the logic, but it seems, I'll have to think about it, but it seems reasonable that could occur.
Okay. Thank you.
I think, yeah,
Okay,
I think Gabe dropped off, but we did have the discussion about the difference between RTPD and RTD, and we're not going to be looking at look ahead. It's only based off of the binding intervals, but you are correct that if it's binding in the RTPD, we would be looking at across those that entire 15-minute interval, and that would apply to the 3 5-minute intervals that coincide with that. And
Because
that is one aspect.
Hypothetically, you could have offsetting dispatches, a commitment in the RTPD that's then subsequently reversed in the RTD because the constraint no longer exists. But you're both would then be ineligible for BCR.
Right.
Okay.
If it's binding in either, correct.
Okay, and
All
given
right.
that they're two independent decisions by the market at two different times, given two different operational situations and conditions. So it seems like there's a case where an uneconomic, and especially given that we're often working on advisory intervals with the MIO, it just seems like you need to look at each independently and have a distinct flag for the 15-minute versus the 5-minute dispatch, not just lump it all in.
All right. Thank you very much. And yeah, one can take that into consideration. I see we have some other hands here, and I'd like to give a couple other people opportunities, and we only have a few minutes left. So let's go to, let's see, I'm going to go to Alva and then Sean again, and then we will move on. Alva?
Yeah, this is just this is my take on Mike's question. I believe the flag is supposed to be set by hour. I may be wrong, but I thought that the flag was going to be set for the hour, and that was the way that the FERC filing was expressed. So, and maybe just to get a clarification on that.
Yeah, Gabe is not on the call anymore, but Tyler, do you have the answer to that? Do you know? If not, we can, make sure we get back to you.
I thought we had the filing based off of the interval.
Okay, we'll have to clarify that. I'll clarify that. We'll put it in the slide deck and repost. All right. All right, I do not see other questions right now. There will be one more opportunity for questions, so we're not done yet. Let's talk about some just overall settlements impact. So the retroactive settlements go back to trade date 9/20/22, and that is because that is when the date that we filed with FERC for this. As I mentioned before, it impacts the real-time market net amount pre-calc, and we're going to resettle the trade dates using these new flags in that pre-calc. The resettlement will be run on the next available settlement trade date, meaning the 9/20/22, the next settlement statement for that settlement is on the T+11 month, so that's where you'll see it. So it just depends on when the next settlement statement is, and that's where these resettlements will occur. And I have a link to the payment calendar, so you will be able to check it out. It's on another slide. You'll be able to check out what dates you should be receiving these retroactive settlements. And of course, to validate this, you're going to be able to have that new CMRI report, and you're going to look at the bid cost recovery settlements and validate that the constraint was triggered. You can also submit disputes if you need to on these incremental changes. So that's the retroactive settlement. The going forward settlement essentially starts on 6/1, and you can use your new report to help validate that. And again, you have the ability to submit disputes via city if necessary. I'm going to skip over this, but I will stop again for questions when I'm done, since I just have one more slide. So the action items from this particular initiative is register for MarketSim as soon as possible if you have not already and you would like to participate. I encourage you to attend our settlements user group meetings where we give updates on MarketSim things settlement related. The MarketSim is starting today. We have MarketSim meetings on Mondays and Thursdays at 2 o'clock. So we're going to have one today at 2. You might want to tune in. And I'd encourage you to run those MarketSim scenarios, validate the results. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can put them in City. And I've given you a little picture of the functional environment that you should be using, Market Simulation Summer 2023. For your retroactive settlements, again, you're going to want to refer to the ISO payment calendar for the schedule, and the link is at the bottom. And submit disputes if you need to. And going forward, as always, you're going to want to validate your bid cost recovery settlements. So that is all the material that I have, but I do want to open it up one more time for questions. I know we're a minute over. Are there any final questions? I don't see any hands raised, but I'm going to give you a minute in case you have a question. Additionally, I don't see anything in the chat, but give me a second here. Krishanti, please unmute yourself.
Hi, this is a quick question. I did create a CD ticket for this. Is the API going to be available for this soon? It's not published yet in developer.guy, so.
Trang, do you have any insight into when the API will be published for this?
Hi, thanks for Shanti. I'll give an update by the Market Sim call. Thanks for your city that you submitted for that. And I don't have one right now, but by 2 o'clock's call, I'll have an update for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Trang.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? I don't see anything else, so I thank you for your time. I will be sending out a course evaluation. Additionally, if you still have questions, you always can submit an inquiry in City. You can send an email to us at customerreadiness@caiso.com, and I'll take a look at that. Or there's always the contact us on the CAISO website up there in the corner. Once again, thank you for your time. Sorry we ran over a bit, and have a great rest of your day. I will post the recording when it is available. Thank you.